This award lets me know that Bonjour, good morning. Bonjour, comment ça va? Et toi, ça va très bien. Bienvenue, Wan Ying, benvenuta, benvenita, namaste, and welcome. Welcome to another exciting episode of Gem Hunter Stories. My name is Barry B. Mixon, and I am a gemological storyteller. And what I do each week is I take the art, science, history, and magic of gemstones, precious metals, and fine jewelry, and I put them all together into a story. Because what I discovered over many years is that many of the same characteristics, the traits that you find in gemstones, you find in people. So what I do is I take those stories and I use them as a template, as an inception point, as a bridge to help people, to empower people to discover the value of their own stories. We're going to continue on with the celebration of Women's History Month. And before we get started, I want to first thank all of you. I was looking at the numbers of people watching this show, and I just want to thank all of you for watching this show each week. All your comments, your phone calls, your texts. It helps me a lot because this, as I tell you each week, this is an evolution. This is a journey, not only just for you, but a journey for me. Thank you, Barbara. Last week, so let's start off with a review. We got some new people on today, so let's start with the review. Last week, we talked about the beauty of metamorphism, and we talked about something that you learned in the 4th, 5th, or maybe 7th or 8th grade, the rock cycle. And I told you that there's 3 types of rocks on the planet Earth: igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic rock. And with those cycles, there's different things that make it's literally a cycle. So all rocks are made, they interchangeable. So you go from igneous rock, you go to sedimentary rock, you have rocks that are transformed. Those are metamorphic rocks. And heating, cooling, weathering, erosion, cementation, compaction, pressure, all those things make the rocks what they are. And I told you about igneous rock, and we won't go over each one, but I told you how igneous rock is the primary rock. Those are the rocks that come from lava, comes from the magma inside the earth, lava outside of the earth, and volcanoes. So the whole earth was literally formed by volcanic reactions. So 95% of the earth crust is igneous rock. And I told you that from igneous rock, there's a whole variety of different gemstones that come from that. Diamonds, corundum, which is the family. Rubies, sapphires are called corundum. Beryls, which is aquamarine, emerald, which we're used to. Garnet, peridot, or some people say peridot, spinel, topaz, all come from igneous rock. And those rocks, igneous rocks, are created as a result of intense heat. I mean, when I say heat, we're not talking about just a hot day in the summer in Chicago. We're talking about 2, 3, 4, 5,000 degrees. In terms of a diamond, we're talking about 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit. Go ahead and make the conversion. Then we talked about sedimentary rock. And these are some of the gemstones that are created as a result of sedimentary rock. And sedimentary rock is that rock that comes around in regards to layers. Beryls, opal, quartz, turquoise, malachite, azurite. These are gemstones that come as a result of sedimentary rock. And in fact, before we go back, well, I'll continue on. So those type of rocks, sedimentary rocks, come as a result of weathering and erosion. So weathering, we're talking about rain, we're talking about water, we're talking about wind, and over hundreds, thousands, millions of years, the rock becomes eroded, becomes shaped, becomes formed, and the ones that make that are the ones that eventually become the gemstones that you wear. Sedimentary rock. And then we have metamorphic rock. And we talked about metamorphic rock because, and these are the gemstones that come from it: topaz, beryl, corundum, garnets, your lapis, your malachite, your jade, which is extremely tough gemstone. We'll have a whole episode of difference between hardness and toughness. I've done it before, but I want to later on we'll get into that deeper. Another episode. Spinel, topaz. This is topaz. So those of you born in November, this is your gemstone. And so what makes metamorphic rock amazing is because the rock has been transformed. You're talking about a rock that has a specific molecular structure. It has something that's inside of it. And because of either heat, pressure, or both, that rock has transformed into something else. All right. So that's what but today we're going to talk about, and I told you that each one of those types of rock cycles can relate to us. See, the beautiful thing to me about gemology, and that's why you hear my excitement and passion. I had one person say, "You're a little bit too passionate," because it's so exciting to not just rediscover gemology, but to really understand how it relates to us. So the question I asked you last week was, what have you been through in your life? And when you discover what you have been through in your life, when you really reflect on that, I told you that is a part of, that's your story. That's your story. Just like when I look at this is the loop. When I look at a gemstone, whether it be my microscope or through a loop, when I look at a gemstone, what I'm really looking for is, what is the story of this gemstone? How did this gemstone come about? How did the size come about? The color, what is it made out of? Where did it come from? And only once I understand that story, then can I do an appraisal on it. Can I realize what the value of that gemstone is? We got that? So let's make that, let's reverse that. Let's transcend that to us. Igneous rock, you're talking about heat. You're talking about something going on in your life. And again, when I say heat, I'm talking about your parents. I'm talking about your siblings. I'm talking about where you live, the environment you live in, school, work, heat that you have to go through each day. That's part of, and those are the things that you've had to go through in your life. That's the heat, igneous rock. Some of you have gone through the heat or the heat of igneous rock within who you are, and it has layered over time. So sedimentary rock, or people who have gone through different things in their lives, and years later, decades later, layer after layer of being told that you're stupid, being told that you're this, being told that you're that, being told that, whatever. I told you, my mom was interesting. I thought I was a rock for many, many years, that I didn't have any value and those things layered over time. So that's sedimentary rock. And then we have metamorphic rock. Metamorphic rock is those things, those people who have taken the things that they have experienced in their lives, and those things changed them. Those things change who they are. I'm thinking about Forrest Gump. Remember how Forrest Gump, he had some type of ailment, some type of physical condition that he had to wear braces. And it was because those boys that was chasing him, that little girl said, "Run, Forrest, run." And he started running. And it was as a result of what he went through with his legs that allowed him to become a runner. So that's metamorphic rock. What things have changed you? What conditions have you gone through in your life that made you who you are today? So what today we're going to talk about is the elegance of gem identification. And now we've talked about, and a lot of the theme of this whole program is based on gem identification because it's extremely important for us to not only know the person that we're dealing with, whether it be at work, whether it be our home, whether it be our partners, our husbands, our wife, gem identification. Who is that person? How did they come about? Why do they do the things that they do? Some of you are sitting there right there, I really like to understand. But let's put it in a positive spin. Not that they're doing something wrong. Let's talk about gem identification in regards to understanding the value of what that person is. This is Women's History Month. And for the whole month, today is the 22nd of the month. So for 22 days, we have been hearing stories about women throughout history, all over the world. Black women, white women, Asian women, Hispanic women. The things that they have done in their lives that were spectacular, that was magnificent. The women who have raised children, the women who have taken care of homes despite everything going on. They did it. Despite the way they may have felt about themselves, despite the transgressions that they've had to go through, despite the things that they have endured. Last week, we talked about my wonderful best friend and executive producer, Barbara, what she has gone through in her life. Her father being murdered, being bullied as a child. Many of us gone through those kind of things. So what I'm here to talk about today is the elegance, the elegance in Francais of gem identification. Identifying that gemstone, that person that you're dealing with, that person that's in your life, and also who you are. Now, why is that important? Why is that important? Let me show you why that is important from a gemological point of view, and then we can extrapolate that to you. All right. So, congratulations. You have all been made gemologists. You spiritually, I will give you, each one of you will get a loop spiritually. Okay. Just kind of imagine having a loop. And we're gonna do a lab experiment today. Rubies versus red beryl. All right. So what I want you to do now that you're a newly minted gemologist, I want you to tell me which one is which. Okay. Here we go. Here's gemstone number one. Red. All we know is it's red. Red gemstone number one. This is what it looks like in the faceted. Is that a ruby or is that a red beryl? Wow, that word was hard to get. Red beryl. Which one? This is in the faceted form. Let me show you in the gemstone number one in the natural form. Is this a ruby or is this a red beryl? Which one? Let me help you out. Here. This is where it comes from. Surely, come on. Surely you know what this is. Surely you can just look at that mountain and say, yep, that's absolutely whatever you think it is. Fill in the blank. Let's go to gemstone number two. Here's another. Look, this is the home. This is where gemstone number one comes from. So if you are the type of person that identifies something from where it's from, this is where red gemstone number one comes from. Here's gemstone number two. We know it's red. You have some extinction in regards to the color. You have some color banding. All right, looks very, very nice. This is what gemstone number two looks like in its natural form. Is it a ruby or is it a red beryl? Come on, you can do this. We do this all the time. You look at people all the time and determine what that person is just based on looking at it. So this should be easy for you. This should be no problem. Just out of fairness, let me show you where gemstone number 2 lives. This is where gemstone number 2 lives. The home of gemstone number 2. That alone should tell you what it is. Come on. Easy. No problem. You've been doing this for years. Here we go. Gemstone number 2. There you go. You can tell. You can just look at that and say, honey, I know exactly what that is. That is a fill in the blank. So ruby or red beryl. So once you decide what it is, let's say you decided, if you know what a ruby is, you know what a ruby, but you may not know what a red beryl is. And if you're trying to figure out what a red beryl is, if you're trying to narrow down what it is, you have to first understand what is a beryl, right? What is a beryl? One last thing. What is a beryl? Which one is a ruby? Which one is a beryl? Wow, they're both red. They both have an interesting shape. They both come from some other kind of stone. Which one is it? Here it is, and here's another view. Gemstone number 1, red. Gemstone number 2, red. Which one? A beryl. So if you're going to start understanding, if you're going to make that decision, whether it's a ruby or a beryl, you have to first define what is a beryl. What is a beryl? What is the characteristics of a beryl? First, you have to understand that beryl comes in 8 different colors. To begin with, just the starting point, that beryl comes in 8 different varieties of colors. You got emeralds, you got heliodor, you got bisbite, bixbite, aquamarine, maxine, morganite, goshenite, and trapeze. And trapeze, I've only seen once or twice in my whole career. Okay, in a very nice form. Yeah. So you have to first start thinking about, if you decided it's a beryl, why? Why did you decide that? Aquamarine, beautiful stone. Is that if you're basing aquamarine on its bluish color? How do we know there's aquamarine? How do we not know that it's a spinel? How do we not know whether it's tourmaline? It's blue. Here you have emerald. Is this a natural emerald or is this a synthetic emerald? The clues are right there. Of course you know it because you've just been made a gemologist, so you already know. Yeah, okay. Here is what is this? I'm sorry, this is heliodor. This is heliodor. You notice, it's heliodor because it has more of a greenish yellow tint versus golden beryl, which is a lot more brighter yellow. Golden beryl. So this is heliodor and this is golden beryl. Here's morganite. Has that pink color. Which makes it morganite. And the thing that makes morganite pink is the same element that makes aquamarine blue. You have to know that. You have to know that the same, if both of all these beryls are made of, what's the chemical composition of beryl? Come on, we talked about it. This is a test question. Remember, beryllium, aluminum, silicate. All right. So in this gemstone, morganite, if you put some iron in it, that's what you get. A morganite. Then there's Maxine. I always remember or forget how to pronounce it. It's a interesting. I just call it Maxine, but it's a blue. It's a darker blue than the aquamarine. This is also a beryl. What is this made of? Why? How do we know that this is a beryl and not a sapphire? How do we know? There's lots of blue gemstones. How do we know that's a beryl? Based on what? Based on just looking at it? Here's goshenite. Many of you didn't know that most gemstones, especially gemstones that are allochromatic, meaning that here's the basic structure and then there's something that's put in it. Well, if you didn't put anything in it, this is what you get. You get a colorless beryl. So think of an emerald, which is a beryl with no color. The thing that makes emerald is chromium. So if you have no chromium and if you just have basic beryllium, aluminum, silicate, this is what you get, goshenite. So when you buy a gemstone and it's colorless, what is that? What is that? It's a color. I mean, it could be a lot of things. It could be a whole bunch of gemstones. Look at this gemstone and say to yourself that you absolutely know that that's goshenite. Based on what? And everything that I'm saying, I want you to think about how we look at people, how we look at women. If you just said women, a woman, and you base that woman based on, you're looking at the woman and you're making that decision is made on what? And let's just be fair. When you're looking at a guy, when you're looking at a man, you say, oh, girl, he is just so fine. What else do you know? What else do you know? And the reason why this is so amazing to me is because as I'm going through this, as I'm looking at this section, preparing for this week, and as I told you, each week it's like an adventure for me. I told you last week when we ended, I didn't know which direction I was going to go. And this conversation really started from a conversation I had with one of our viewers, lovely woman named Annika. Hi, Annika, if you're watching. And we was talking about rubies. And when I started thinking about rubies, I started thinking about the color red. And I said, well, what makes a ruby special? What makes a ruby different? Because she said, oh, I love rubies. Rubies are my favorite gemstone. And I started thinking, well, okay, ruby's your favorite gemstone. What if I put something else in your view that's red? How would you know? Goshenite. Look at it. Beautiful. That's what it looks like in its natural form. Goshenite. There you go. Then we have trapeze. Trapeze emerald. And what this is basically emerald. You have the beryllium, aluminum, silicate. That's what this is. With iron. With iron. So with the iron, so not only do you have the chromium, which gives it the green color, and you have to understand that same chromium that makes an emerald green is what makes a ruby red. So those things that's put into this gemstone manifest in a different way in emerald. And then if you add some iron to that in a specific way, if it's formed in a certain, this is what you get. And then there's red beryl. Look at it. Before you became a gemologist, what would you have said that was? What would you have said that gemstone? If I just showed you that picture, how many of you, raise your hand, be honest, how many of you would say, well, that's a ruby? And I would have said, why is it a ruby? And you said, because it's red. Oh, okay. Now, some of you are saying, well, it's not as red as, some of you are saying it's not as red as I would think. You would have been fooled. Because guess what? Rubies come in that, depending on the grade of the rubies also can come into that reddish raspberry type of color. Yeah. So you raise your hand if you picked red beryl. Okay. You would be correct. All right. Gemstone number 1 was a red beryl. Gemstone number 2 was a ruby. Now that you've decided that it's a red beryl, so what? Everybody talks about emeralds. Emeralds is the gemstone. In the beryl family, emeralds are the gemstone. Emerald is that brother or sister that you have that always gets all the props. You know, everybody's like, oh my God, emeralds, emeralds, emeralds. I love your sister. Your sister's an emerald. And you're sitting there as a red beryl saying, yeah, okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's nice. Come on, how many of us go through that? where you have a sibling or somebody in high school. You're in high school, and of course, there's all these cliques, and you got Steve. When I was in high school, there was this guy named David Johnson. David Johnson was just the man. He was the jock. All the women loved him. He had a six-pack. In the 10th grade, he played every sport. So everybody was like, David, oh my God, David Johnson. And I'm sitting there like, okay. So you're a red barrel. And people may not even notice who you are because you're a red barrel and everybody's looking at emeralds. So what makes a red barrel special? Why do we talk about red barrels more versus why did emeralds get the top billing? Red barrel, which is also called a bixbyite. All right, some people call it a red emerald, red barrel, still made out of beryllium aluminum silicate. Its coloring agents. Always think about most gemstones either are allochromatic, meaning you have a structure and you put something in it that gives it that color, or it's idiochromatic, meaning that coloring agent, the thing that gives it the color, is built into the structure. And the way you make the analogy with that in people is there's some people who literally became better at what they do because they went to school to learn how to do it. They learned how to run. They learned how to do a art or sculpture or painting or being a teacher or doing anything, being a race car driver. They learned how to do it. Then you have people, so that's allochromatic, people who learn how to do it. And then you have people who are idiochromatic, meaning they just were born to do it. Michael Phelps comes to mind. Michael Phelps, the greatest swimmer, Olympic swimmer of all time. You know that Michael Phelps became a swimmer? He had ADHD. And his mother just wanted to give him something to do. So she threw him in the pool. She put him into swimming. And because Michael Phelps, his molecular structure, his body is built where he has extra large feet and his ankles literally can rotate on an extended level. So basically he has his own fins. He has extremely long arms and hands. So he's idiochromatic. He was built to swim. Beryl is allochromatic. You need to put manganese in that beryllium aluminum silicate in order to give it that red color. Now, when you think of manganese, most people don't realize that manganese is the element that makes steel. Yes, iron is a part of it, but without manganese, you don't have steel. It was named after a man, and I forgot to put his name down. His last name was Bixby, so they named it after him, Bixbyte. But they changed it because he actually named two gemstones, and it was like Bixbyte and some other name so they wanted to stop the confusion, so they just called it Bixbyte or red beryl. Discovered in Colorado in 1980. Now, this gemstone took at least 200 million years to form, but they didn't find it until 1980. It's only found in one place. The best varieties of this gemstone is found in one place in the world. Utah, in what's called the Wawa Mountains. And this gemstone is one of the most, if not the most rarest gemstone in the whole world. It's only found in one place in very small quantities. In fact, when you read about this gemstone, literally this gemstone has more value than gold. This gemstone right here is the value of is 1,000 times the value of gold. Gold is what, $1,800 an ounce right now? 1,000 times that value. And it comes in very small quantities, sizes. The largest red beryl they ever had is 2 carats, and that's extremely rare. Most of it's what's called melee, those little tiny you guys call it chips in jam. That's what a melee is. Melee, melee. But yet, up to no matter what size, it's worth up to $50,000 a carat. This is where it comes from. This is Wawa. This is the Wawa Mountains in Utah. And what makes Red Beryl really special, remember we talked about igneous, sedimentary, metamorphic, and this is what I love about doing this show and literally re-looking at everything, because I always thought, because beryl mostly is a metamorphic stone, and I was going to name this show The Beauty or the Elegance of Metamorphism. But then I realized when I thought about it and looked at it, again, the story, I realized that red beryl is not wholly metamorphic. It's actually sedimentary. The rock there is sedimentary. So when you look at the rock of beryl, this is in Utah. It's not there. Salt Lake City's in the upper right-hand corner. Here's Salt Lake City around here, and here is where Wawa Mountains are, right in Utah. You can visit. There's mines, there's tours, everything. And when you look at the story of it, where it comes from, you notice if you look closely, it looks kind of has porous. That's because in that area of the world, in that area of the planet, was a super volcano. 60 million years ago, there was a huge volcanic eruption. So igneous rock, huge volcanic reaction. And this is actually called Crystal Mountain, because this from that igneous rock came that structure. Again, igneous rocks makes mountains. So from that came igneous. So this whole mountain, it's filled with crystals, different types of crystals. Look at it. Looks just like the pumice stone that you got in your bathtub, in your bathroom. So it's igneous rock, hot, heat, layered with sedimentary rock. So the heat juts out into the igneous. There was sedimentary rock, and then the igneous rock juts out. It's called tuffs. It basically, it's like taking a hot probe and you're putting it into the sedimentary rock. And because of the heat on the sedimentary rock, changes it to what's called red beryl. So that's what a red beryl is. Igneous rock, remember, volcanoes, lava, to sedimentary rock. The layers, right? Remember we talked about the different layers. $50,000 a carat. $50,000 a carat. This one gemstone that most of you have never heard of, most of you have never even realized that emerald had, or beryls had, different varieties, and yet now you're learning that red beryl is one of the most, if not the most expensive or highly valued gemstone of all gemstones. And then when we come back on the other side, I'm going to show you how that relates to you. All right, we're back. So let's just do a recap. We talked about the different types of gemstones, different types of rock types. We defined, we had a choice between rubies and is it a red beryl? We realized that it was a red beryl. I told you about how a red beryl is formed. And now we understand that a red beryl, some of you are saving your money up and looking in your bank accounts right now, $50,000 per carat. Per carat. Now, some of you are like, oh my God, that's amazing. Look at it. It's beautiful. Now, here's the rest of the story. When you understand what a red beryl is, when you understand what a beryl is, A beryl is, again, beryllium, aluminum, silicate. The problem with beryl is this, and the differences between rubies and a red beryl or beryls in general. Beryl has a hardness of about 7.5 to 8. So again, it goes from 1 to 10, 10 being a diamond. So it's not a bad hardness, but the problem with beryls is it has a lot of inclusions in it. Some of them do. Now, this is March. This is the month for aquamarine. So aquamarine is what's called eye clean. So when you take a loop and look at it, there's very few, well, if you have a loop, you probably could see some, but for the most part, there's no inclusions in aquamarine, which is also a beryl. But emeralds, and especially red beryls, are highly included. Highly included. Meaning that because inclusions are not just cracks, there's different things in it. And because of the different things that's in a red beryl, it changes it weakens the molecular structure of it. So therefore, if you have a red beryl, it's just like an emerald. You have to protect it because it's brittle. It can break. In fact, most people who, again, red beryls are very small. We're talking about less than 1 carat. So if you have a red beryl, most people don't even facet a red beryl because 1 is very small, 2 are because of the inclusions. So they just keep it natural. They keep it in. And basically a red beryl is, most people don't even use it for jewelry. The collectors who have that kind of money will just collect it and just put it on the shelf and put it in a glass enclosure and say, honey, I got a red beryl. Look at my red beryl. Now let's just put that in terms of relationships. You walked into a club, you walked into a meeting, you walked into a party, and you saw this person who was red. Red is your color. Yeah. As I put on my Facebook page, I realized that most of the relationships that I was in my life was because that woman had red nails, red lipstick, red dress, red shoes, something red. Red is that color of sexuality and sensuality. So you're in the club and you see this person. It's, oh, man, did you see that girl? Woo, Lord, she's fine. And you don't know. Is it a ruby? Ruby has a hardness of a 9. Corundum has a hardness of 9. So it's a little bit closer, exponentially closer to 10 than red beryl is. Rubies have inclusions, but not the type of inclusions that red beryl has. Rubies is a wonderful gemstone because it has a really good hardness. So you can wear it in earrings. You can wear it in rings. You can wear it in necklaces, a ruby. But red beryl, even though it's beautiful, there's things you couldn't do with it. Beryls, by nature, are sensitive to heat. So when you pick that person because that person looked a certain way, you don't know anything else about that person. All you saw was the fact that they just was handsome or they were pretty. That's all you saw. You didn't understand that if that person is a red beryl, there's things that you can't do with that person. That person will never grow. And I'm not talking about just in size, but grow in who they are. That's who they are. That person may be strong in some ways, but weak in other ways. Gem identification. And I started thinking, not just this week, but always, one of the things that made me make the connection between people and gemstones and people, is if we looked at our relationships from a gemological point of view, some of the mistakes that we've made, some of the divorces or the bad relationships that we made or had in our lives possibly couldn't happen. Because if you looked at it from that person from a gemological point of view, then you would understand that for you to understand who that person is, for you to know who that person is, you have to understand what? You have to know what? Begins with an S. You have to understand their story. You have to understand who they are. How do they interact with the light? Just because that person, look, Bobby Brown said, well, a pretty face and a smile, right? Just because that person is beautiful or handsome or muscular or intelligent or got lots of money, that's just one characteristic. That's just one thing that be on in the journey of discovering who that person is. And what most people do is they just buy it, they just marry it, they just date it, they just sleep with that person, having no idea who that person was. I was watching a documentary just the other day on Bill Cosby. It's on Showtime. Let's have a conversation about Bill Cosby. And I grew up with Bill Cosby. I am a Cosby kid. I watched Fat Albert. I ate Jello pudding and Jello gelatin because of Bill Cosby. And hey, Fat Albert. And the image of who we thought Bill Cosby was America's dad. Bill Cosby was the first black man on television. In the 60s, Bill Cosby was it. He was the only black man I saw on TV that he was a spy. Remember I Spy and all the things he would do? He was intelligent. And yet, decades later, we discover who Bill Cosby really was. And if you watch the documentary, I'm not even talking about this 4 or 5 series. I've only watched the first one. They showed you all the different things that Bill Cosby did and literally said. And nobody saw it. Nobody saw his inclusions. Nobody saw the things that was going on around here. This is Red Barrel, highly magnified, because Red Barrel is very small. This is less than 1/4 of a carat. It's slightly faceted just to give it a little bit of shape, but look at it. Look at the inclusions. And if you're just impressed with it because it costs a lot of money or because it's red, you don't really understand what it is. And the elegance of gem identification is not just making that person wrong or bad. It's understanding who or what that person is. How does that person relate to you? If you have a red barrel or even an emerald, you don't want to put it in heat. You don't, especially an emerald, because an emerald, which is a barrel, most emeralds that you own has been treated. The reason why it has that clear color is not because emeralds come like that. They don't. Emeralds and barrels are highly included. In fact, when I look at it, when someone shows me an emerald ring, the first thing I'm looking for is inclusions. Because if I don't see inclusions, there's only 2 things that happen. Either it's been treated or it's natural. I'm sorry, it's either been treated or it's synthetic. So when you look at a barrel, in this case an emerald, or when you look at a red barrels are so small you probably wouldn't see, but let's say an emerald. When you look at an emerald and you're just impressed because it has that beautiful green color, how did it get there? And when I say treated, what happens is normally with an emerald, you have to put oil in it. It's called Opticon. 99% of emeralds are treated. If they're not treated, they're synthetic. And so if you marry that person, if you're dating that person, if you create a business with that person, you understand you may not want to have business with a person that's an emerald, because emeralds are beautiful. But emeralds are treated, and emeralds can take a lot of stress. Because of the molecular structure in it, it can't take stress. So when you're in a business with someone who's an emerald, if the business is not doing well or you're going through a pandemic, emerald's not going to make it. Or it's going to be a harder thing to go through because they're an emerald. And you're sitting there like, how the heck did I get with this person? You got with this person because you didn't know what that person was. And the elegance of that comes from the freedom. It comes from the freedom of understanding that if you made that misstep, I won't call it a mistake. If you made that misstep, it's just because as a gemologist, you didn't look at all the characteristics. You looked at the color and said, oh, okay. You looked at the shape and said, yeah, okay, I want that. What else? What else is that? Every gemstone, almost every gemstone, has multiple colors. I could show you green tourmaline. I could show you green spinel. I could show you so many different gemstones that have that color, that have that red color. I've showed you weeks ago, episodes ago, I showed you rubies and spinel. In fact, the red ruby is called the Black Princess Ruby. It sits in the crown of the Queen of England. 500 years that crown has existed. It wasn't until like maybe 100 years ago that they found out it wasn't a ruby at all. It's a spinel. Now, it still has tremendous value because of where it sits. But if you were looking for a ruby, if you thought that was a ruby, it's not. It's not. And because I discovered that, I can't tell you how wonderful it feels to basically have a sense of control over your life, a sense of peace in your life, of not only just the people that you're dealing with now. This is Red Beryl. Look at it. Beautiful. Very small. I mean, I know it looks small, big in this picture, but it's extremely small. Cut in a very beautiful shape, faceted. And this is what's basically called a fantasy cut. Yeah. But you can't wear it. You wouldn't wear it because you couldn't do anything with it. It just sits there. You know, it's that pretty, it's the man that you got at home that, you know, he looks good, he's handsome and hair, but he don't want to work. He don't want to go to a job. He doesn't want to pay the bills because he's a Red Beryl. Yeah. Those women that you see on everywhere, TikTok, Facebook, that are just, they got the body, they got the hair, they got the nails, they got the weave, they got the makeup, all this other kind of stuff. That is exactly what I'm talking about. Yes, she is beautiful. Yep. What else? Gem identification. And to me, the beautiful thing about gemology is if we break things down to its smallest dimension, when we're talking about molecules, when we're talking about atoms, we're talking about molecular structure. The same rules that exist for these gemstones exist for you, except on a much wider basis. Gemstones is easy. You're talking about one or two elements. Manganese, that's what makes that red. Manganese. How many different elements, how many different things that are inside of people that you have to determine? Their education, where did they grow up? What the things that they go through in their life, in their childhood? How did it affect them? How did it affect the way they are? How did it affect the way they interact with the light? And when you realize if it happens like that in gemology, you know it happens at home. You know it happens with you. And the beauty of it, the difference between being a gemstone and being a human, it's not just the fact that we're living. We get a choice. We get to decide not only what goes inside of us. If you want to lose weight, then you know what you have to do. If you want a better job, then you know what you have to do. If you want to basically have a better education, you know what you have to do. Gemstones don't have that opportunity. That barrel is at least 200 million years old. 200 million years old. And in my mind, gemstones wish they were us, because that red barrel's sitting there like, yeah, okay, this is who I am going to be forever. But it doesn't have to be you. You can change your story. Once you understand how stories work, as I say every week, nothing has value without a story. So when you understand the story of who you are and all the elements that came into being to make you who you are, that's where the power comes from. That's where the elegance comes from. Because you can make it into, you could become whatever you want to become. Red barrel. It's cut like this. Is most of you know this is what's called an emerald cut. It's actually called a step cut. And the reason why it's called a step cut is because this gemstone, red barrels and emeralds, have to be cut like this in order to protect it. It has to be able to protect the edges. That's what it is. Here, look at all the inclusions. Look at the inclusions that's in this red barrel. All those cracks, those are called inclusion. That's natural. That's natural. It even comes in a slightly purple variety, depending on the chemical processes that's inside it, depending on the the elements that's inside. So, what I wanted you to get out of today is a continuation of the concept of not only just gem identification, but also, what's your story? Who are you? How did you become the person that you are? How did that person that you're with in that relationship, in that business relationship, in that personal relationship, who is that person and how do they interact with the light? And how do what they are interact with who you are? Because you don't want to put an emerald next to a whole lot of diamonds loosely. Why? Because diamonds are 10, an emerald or red barrel is a 7. So that diamond can scratch an emerald, can scratch a red barrel. So if you're a diamond and you're married to an emerald or red barrel or something like, or has a lower hardness, you're going to scratch that person. You see how that works? So again, that's what I want you to get. That's your homework assignment. Figure out what are the elements in your life? What are the things that made you who you are? Just pick one, because there's so many. But just pick one element in your life that helped you become the person that you are today. The way that, as you're studying Women's History Month, look at one woman and say, what is her? Oh my God, I can't remember the woman's name. The first female black millionaire who did the hair. That came as a result of the person she was working with wasn't treating her right, wasn't paying her. So she went to her kitchen and she whipped all that up and became who she was. I told you my story. I was homeless because of the things that my mother made me feel, but yet at the same time, those things that my mother, the strength, the things that my mother said to me is the thing that made me survive homelessness. So it's all up to you to be whoever you need to be. So I hope you enjoyed today. Next week will be, I think we got one more week of Women's History Month, and we're going to talk about a different aspect of barrels, because again, this is the month of March, aquamarine, which is the barrel. And I want you to start thinking about what this all means to you. How do you relate this to your own life? And as always, my name is Barry B. Mixon. I am a gemological storyteller. And to take the time, your homework assignment always is going to be, take the time to discover the value of your own stories, of who you are, of how you interact with the light. So until next week, au revoir, à te tella, voilà. Here's a gem bit. What if I told you that one of the most expensive and rare gemstones in the entire world can be found right here in the United States? It's called Bixbyte or red emerald. It's so rare that prices start at $50,000 per carat, which leaves only one question. What's in your wallet? Discover the value of your story.